The night my father-in-law pushed a thick envelope across the table and told me to sign it, something inside me didn't break the way they expected. It sharpened. The entire room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that feels staged, like everyone already knows their lines except you. I looked at my husband, Ethan, hoping for even a flicker of hesitation, but he just stared into his glass like it held the answer to everything he didn't have the courage to say. When I opened the envelope and saw the divorce papers already prepared, already dated, I realized this wasn't a conversation, it was an execution. I wish I could say I reacted dramatically, that I stood up and shattered their perfect dinner with words they'd never forget. But I didn't. I stayed seated at that long polished table, surrounded by people who had spent years pretending to be my family. I read every page slowly, carefully, the way my mother raised me to handle anything important. My hands didn't shake, my breathing stayed steady. When I finished, I looked at Ethan again, and for a brief moment, he met my eyes before looking away like a man who knew he had already lost something but refused to admit it. What none of them realized was that I had been preparing for this moment long before that dinner. For 11 days, I had known exactly how this night would unfold, and I wasn't the only one. My best friend Olivia sat just a few seats away, quiet and observant, with something tucked inside her jacket that would change everything before the night was over. But to understand why I signed those papers without hesitation, you have to understand the kind of family I married into and the slow, quiet damage they had been doing for years. I met Ethan at a friend's party in downtown Chicago when I was 28. He was charming in a way that felt safe, attentive without being overwhelming. He talked about his family like they were close, like loyalty meant everything to them. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. We dated for over a year, and when he proposed, I believed I was stepping into something stable, something real. The first time I met his parents, Richard and Eleanor, I noticed small things that didn't quite sit right, but I ignored them. His mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. His father spoke over me constantly. Old photos of Ethan with his ex-girlfriend were still displayed around the house like she had never really left. I told myself it didn't matter. I had built my own life. I was independent, financially secure, and not easily shaken. I believed love could smooth over those rough edges. Looking back, I realized I wasn't naive. I was hopeful, and hope can make you overlook things you shouldn't. The pressure started subtly. A few months after our wedding, Eleanor casually asked when we planned to have children. I gave a polite answer, something about enjoying married life first. She smiled, but it wasn't a satisfied smile. It was the kind that lingers just long enough to tell you the conversation isn't over. Over time, those questions became constant. Family dinners, phone calls, even random messages filled with articles about fertility and timing. Richard spoke about legacy like it was a business contract, something that needed to be fulfilled on schedule. Ethan never really defended me. He would squeeze my hand afterward, tell me not to take it personally, but he never actually stopped them. That silence became its own kind of betrayal. About a year into our marriage, I was diagnosed with a condition that could make getting pregnant more difficult. It wasn't impossible, just unpredictable. I was devastated at first, but I believed Ethan when he told me it didn't matter, that we would figure it out together. For a moment, I felt safe again. But something changed after that. His parents became colder, more direct. The comments turned sharper, more pointed, and Ethan became quieter. The truth is, I didn't know everything back then, but Olivia did. She worked in family law, and she had seen enough situations like mine to recognize the warning signs before I did. Over months of conversations, she gently prepared me for possibilities I didn't want to consider. I resisted at first, but I listened, and eventually, I started paying closer attention. Then came Thanksgiving. Richard insisted on hosting a large, formal dinner at his private club. It felt less like a holiday and more like a staged event. There were too many people, too much effort put into appearances. Olivia was there too, invited through a mutual connection, and the moment I saw her expression, I knew something was off. She leaned toward me at one point and told me quietly to stay calm, no matter what happened. I didn't understand then, but I trusted her. Dinner started normally enough. Conversations, laughter, the illusion of a perfect family. Then Richard stood up to speak. His words were polished, rehearsed, full of talk about legacy and responsibility. And then he placed that envelope in front of me, and told me it was the right decision for everyone. I read everything before signing. I didn't rush, I didn't argue. I signed each page carefully and placed it back in front of him. That's when Eleanor brought her in. A younger woman, confident, perfectly dressed, stepping into the room like she already belonged there. She walked straight to Ethan and leaned in close, as if they had already rehearsed this moment together. That was their plan, replace me cleanly, publicly, without resistance. I could have left right then, but I didn't, because Olivia stood up. Her voice was calm, controlled, and she held out a small envelope to Richard. At first, he hesitated, clearly not used to being on the receiving end of anything. But eventually, he opened it. I watched his face change as he read the documents inside. The first was a medical record, proof that Ethan had undergone a vasectomy years before we even met. A permanent decision he had never told me about. The second was a medical confirmation of my pregnancy, verified just 11 days earlier. The silence that followed was nothing like before. It wasn't controlled, it was real, heavy and suffocating. Ethan had allowed his family to blame me for something he knew was never my fault. He had watched me carry that weight for years while saying nothing. And now, standing in that room, the truth was undeniable. I told them everything they needed to hear, not out of anger but clarity. I made it clear that I would raise my child on my own terms, far away from their expectations and their version of legacy. This wasn't their story anymore, it was mine. Then I walked out. The cold air outside felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling judged, measured, or controlled. Olivia joined me a few minutes later, wrapping my coat around my shoulders like she had been waiting for that exact moment all night. The divorce was finalized months later. I kept the house, I rebuilt my life. My mother moved in to help, and when my son was born, I named him James, not after anyone, just because I wanted him to belong to himself. Sometimes I think about Ethan, but not with anger, just understanding. He was a man shaped by fear, by expectations he never learned to challenge. And in the end, that cost him everything that actually mattered. Now, when I sit in my living room, watching my son laugh at something as simple as a ceiling fan, I realize something important. The life I'm building isn't perfect, but it's honest. It's mine. And that night, the night they thought they were ending my story, was actually the moment I finally took control of it.